Let's build a potato farm. Not just any potato farm though. I want to build a giant potato farm that can compete with entire countries. Why? Because I can. Can I build a potato farm so big, so fast that it could beat China, the world's biggest producer of potatoes? Stick to the end to find out. If you've ever built yourself an automatic potato farm in vanilla Minecraft, you probably remember this design where you trap two villagers in a field with a hopper minecart in between to steal crops from the farmers. In SkyFactory 4, we have harvesters. These babies can harvest over 200 potatoes at once, so no need to violate any human rights for this farm. Now all of you, back in the mines! I knew from the get-go that this project was going to be very expensive, but man did I underestimate just how many materials I would need for it. I'm going for the most overkill setup possible, which means I'll need a lot of resources. Most of the main items I need are very basic resources that come from these resource trees. There's iron trees, dirt trees, glowstone trees, and bone trees, so I just have to expand my tree farm a bit and add more smelters and auto crafters to speed things up. Thankfully I had a full set of glitch armor so I can fly around while building. I can't even begin to imagine how much longer it would take to do this without creative flight. Now it's finally time for day 1 of building the actual farm. To start things off, I used some leaves that have been piling up in my inventory to create an outline for the first layer. Though it turns out that player-placed leaves still decay in this version of Minecraft, so I had to replace them on cobblestone. I then filled in the middle with dirt, water, glowstone, and finally sprinklers. Sprinklers are these special items that boost crop growth, and these things are really powerful. A single sprinkler gave me over 5 times more potatoes, and these things stack with each other. So having so many sprinklers makes the potatoes grow really fast. A farm with sprinklers all around gave me over 84 times more potatoes than just a basic farm with nothing. Initially, I was only going to have 1 moat on the outside, but after thinking about it, I realized I can add 4 whole rings of sprinklers on the outside for a hyper-optimized farm. This also means that I have to manually place down over 300 sprinklers per layer, and I had to manually place 1 water source beneath each of these for the first layer. Thankfully for the higher layers, I only needed a few water sources instead of filling up the whole thing. But placing down all the sprinklers with their tiny hitboxes was a massive pain. Before you build a potato farm, first you need to build a beetroot and wheat farm. That's because I need red dye and wheat seeds to craft red fertilizer. So I filled the first layer with beetroot and wheat. Using red fertilizer on the farmland almost triples the number of potatoes than just having sprinklers alone. And by adding a second red fertilizer to the field, I actually make the crops trample proof. So now I won't have to worry about mobs breaking any crops ever again. I knew this farm was going to be powerful, but oh man, with just this 1 layer, I already got more than enough beetroot and wheat for the entire farm in less than an hour. By the way, in case you're wondering how I'm storing everything, all items are getting funneled into this filing cabinet here. Filing cabinets are really broken. I heard that each folder can hold over 2 billion items, so it's easily the best storage device available in the game. Once I had enough beetroot and wheat for my fertilizers, I got rid of them and replaced them with potatoes. Now is where I finally started assembling the rest of the farm. Each harvester I put down had a single item transporter to send into the filing cabinet. But I very quickly realized that 1 item transporter wasn't enough and I had to make more per layer. Things started getting messy with the setup since I needed multiple item transporters for the harvesters, and I had to fine-tune each one by making them harvest in a smaller area or else they overflow. Here's where I hit the first big snag with my setup. I really underestimated how laggy this farm would be. After only 7 layers, the lag was already unbearable, getting me down to single-digit frames per second. And I still had over 70 layers to go. I noticed that the lag only happened while I was looking at the farm, so my best guess is that it's happening because of the sprinkler animation. I don't know how to disable the animation for these, so unfortunately I had to compromise and removed all the extra sprinklers on the outside layer. Thankfully this at least cut down the number of sprinklers I needed from 324 per layer to only 84, but I really wanted to see how broken the farm was going to be at full force. Because there's less sprinklers, I also ended up coming up with a nicer setup for the item transporters by doing this little cross design, which lets me run all the harvesters at max capacity again. From here, I continued to build layer by layer, but I was spending hours for a very little progress, so I decided to work on an outline for the farm just so I don't have to switch around materials to save time later on. This definitely made things much easier for me, as I would just get used to doing the same one action over and over instead of constantly swapping around. It's now day 4 of building, and today I decided to do a bit of remodeling on the farm. Something I realized I can do is to use item collectors to suck up all the potatoes that the harvesters spit out, which is much more reliable than this weird setup I had going on where I had to individually add a bunch of item transporters to each harvester. Plus, the old system was prone to breaking, as I've already had to go in and readjust the harvesters or else they just spit out the potatoes everywhere. Plus, now I hopefully won't have to worry about the harvesters overflowing. I set the item collector to suck up items in a 19 by 19 by 5 area, so I just place these 5 blocks apart. Unlike the harvesters, these things don't use energy, so I don't even need to expand my energy grid to run them. One thing I learned thanks to the setup is that harvesters stop working once they're completely full, so to get around it, I just put in a random item so the harvesters never actually fill up. I did get a few more layers of the farm done, but I was more focused on getting all the harvesters placed down, which I ended up doing fairly quickly. Now it's time for the next biggest hurdle, which is filling in the entire farm with dirt, fertilizers, potatoes, and so on. Day 5 of building the farm, and hey, guess what? I finally learned how to use the building gadgets. Just look at how quickly things are going now thanks to this. If only I'd known about this much sooner, but hey, at least now I know about this for future builds. Thanks to the building gadget, I finished placing all the dirt within a few hours. So next was to till all the dirt and place down fertilizer. Even though farmland turns back to dirt without water, it doesn't change back if you have double fertilizer on it. So I went ahead and fertilized all 83 layers of the farm by holding my hoe in my offhand and fertilizer in the main hand. This is more convenient just because otherwise I'd have to constantly equip fertilizer in my offhand. Once I was done with the fertilizer, I used a building gadget to place down all the potatoes one layer at a time. Just look at how fast this is compared to doing it manually. The building gadget is absolutely disgusting. With the potatoes planted, I moved on to setting up the harvesters and item transfer nodes. To keep things simple, I put 10 item transfer nodes per item collector. Though later on, I found out some layers needed 12. Before I continued, I decided to mess with the energy system a bit just to make the system more self-sufficient. This lava generator was just a system I copied online, and while it works perfectly fine, I wanted to have my farm run itself just to keep things more organized. Instead of using lava generators, I decided to attach culinary generators to the item collectors so that the machine would just power itself with potatoes. I wasn't expecting much at first, but oh man, this system ended up being much more powerful than the lava generator. Plus it was so much cheaper to make. This actually got me curious about how the generators worked, so I decided to take a break and mess around with the generators in my creative file. So it turns out, lava generators aren't as good as I thought. I mean, they're great, but there's other generators that do a better job if you happen to have a farm set up for them. The potato generator I set up only needed 89 speed upgrades instead of 256 for a lava generator. It's about twice as efficient as a lava generator. Looking further into the recipes, I found out that turning a potato into potato juice actually gives 4 times the energy in twice the time. So just adding an autocrafter doubles the efficiency again. This made it so that these 2 culinary generators were all I needed for the entire farm, and I only needed 178 speed upgrades instead of 1000 something upgrades for the lava generators. After finishing up the design, I tried to connect the rest of the harvesters to the generators, and this is where I hit another issue. Yeah, my game started crashing for no reason. I had to spend a few hours messing around with the farm to figure out what was wrong, and it looks like with so many layers of potatoes constantly getting destroyed, this layer was the straw that broke the camel's back. Breaking any potatoes on this or any of the higher layers just causes the game to infinitely try but fail to spawn in more potatoes. If I break a potato, nothing happens, but reloading the game causes the drops to appear normally. I thought there was a limit to how many raw items could be out in the open, which would mean that my item collector system had backfired on me. But when I tried attaching the item transporters directly to the harvester, it still refused to work. The only way I managed to fix this layer was by shutting off the entire farm. But it would just break again as soon as I turned it back on, so I had to give up on these last 5 layers. Strangely enough, Even though these 5 layers refuse to work, I can still add sprinklers to the other layers, and the game wouldn't immediately lag out, so there really was just something wrong with adding a 79th layer to this farm. Now it's time for the final step, which is to add in the remaining sprinklers and glowstone to the farm. That said, this farm is really laggy. At this point, I still had another 55 layers to finish up, and I had around 10 to 20 frames per second the entire time. Not only that, but this was the worst step of them all. I had to manually place down the sprinklers because they don't work with the building gadget, and then I had to fill in all the glowstone as well. It got so bad that I couldn't record the building process anymore because doing so dropped FPS to single digits. Just look at this lag. This video is in real time. After another 3 more days of building, I finally finished a whole farm minus the top 5 layers because of the crashing issues. With the farm done, it was finally time to test the rates. To do so, I took a weirding gadget I made much earlier and placed it near the farm so that the chunk would be loaded. I then flew far away to get away from my island where it was no longer lagging, and here I checked how many potatoes I made over the span of 10 minutes. In total, I get around 488,000 potatoes per minute with this farm. If I were to run this farm for an entire year, I would get about 257 billion potatoes. That's a lot of potatoes. Out of curiosity, I looked up how many potatoes the top country produces in a year. According to the internet, China produces the most potatoes out of all countries in the world, clocking in at 99.2 million metric tons of potatoes in a year. A metric ton is about 2,667 potatoes, so China makes around 265 billion potatoes per year, or 503,000 potatoes a minute. So I'm short by just 15,000 potatoes per minute. I was so disappointed that I lost by such a small margin. So out of curiosity, I decided to calculate how fast my farm would be if I could build those last 5 layers. I could only build 78 of the 83 layers I wanted, so scaling my farm's rate up gets me 519,000 potatoes per minute. Are you absolutely kidding me? If I could just build 3 more layers, I could have beaten China. I lost because of some stupid bug on these last 5 layers that I can't do anything about. You win this time, China. You're the biggest producer of potatoes after all. No one can compete. Time to pack it in. You know what? No. I refuse to concede. I'm so close anyways, I may as well go all in. I can't expand this farm anymore, but I can still build another one much further away. So I decided to build the last 5 layers I missed out on a few chunks away where there's no lag. I spent the next few hours making a new farm from scratch, and thankfully with all the time I spent building the last farm, this one came together very quickly. Now with the missing 5 layers done, I timed my farm again, and this time I got 499,000 potatoes per minute. Wait, that's not right. Hold on. Okay, so it looks like I recorded the wrong numbers the first time, and I actually got 474,000 potatoes the first time around. In my defense, it's hard to count when the numbers are like this. I actually need just another layer or 2, so now let's build 3 more layers, and we now have 523,000 potatoes per minute. It took more than one whole farm, I guess, but either way, take that, China. I am now the world's largest producer of potatoes. Not even an entire country can beat this farm. So now I've got an endless supply of potatoes. I didn't really have a use for this before starting this project, but I guess I now have basically a near infinite power supply to help power all the future farm designs I have in mind. That said, I've now got a new issue I gotta deal with, which is that my island is now unbearably laggy. Turns out when you make a giant farm with thousands of sprinklers installed, it'll make the entire area nearby unplayable. So now I gotta go pack up all my stuff and move far away. So tune in next time where I'll be working on another pointlessly big farm on a brand new island. And hey, if you have any ideas of farm designs that should make pointlessly big and efficient, let me know in the comments below.